started the issues in their relationship is that he spent a lot of time, I think, like the corner of his class, like not being able to participate because he's quote unquote dumb. When low key he's just like nearsighted. Let's see. A lot of famous people went to this spa that the Kellogg's had, the old up in Battle Creek. Anybody from the original J.C. Penney, all up in there. Booker T. Washington, Amelia Earhart, Thomas Edison came through. Even Henry Ford made some appearances, and even some presidents came through there as well. And so John Kellogg was always coming up with different treatments and inventions. That was like his main shtick. It's like what he was into. He is said to have created the first exercise tapes, which I found to be very funny. Just the idea that existed. And so he did. He would put them on records, and while recording exercise techniques and saying them out loud, what you should be doing, yada yada yada, this guy would have a brass band behind him. It's like, they got to get it from somewhere. The Tybo guy got it from somewhere. As stated earlier, Kellogg had worked on as stated earlier, Kellogg had worked on and perfected his recipe for granola by combining flour, oatmeal, and cornmeal. He would mix it together and bake it into dry, flat cakes and then smash them. And after that, hiking trails would never be the same again. And of course, most of us know the Kellogg name from cornflakes, which the story goes were first invented at the Sand, which is what they called it back then, after some dough turned stale and they tried to bake it anyway. It was originally made with wheat, but switched to corn because it tasted better, which that sounds about right. W.K. Kellogg had the idea to put sugar on the cornflakes. So without this guy, we would all be eating dry, plain cornflakes. That's why I say thank you from the bottom of my heart, W.K. Kellogg. That might be fine for some people. I see a lot of people eating those dry, plain cornflakes, using a clear plastic bag. It's usually a child. But I need some sugar on my flakes. Using the same idea, which this is where it gets a little hairy. A former Kellogg patient, C.W. Post, created grape nuts, which would become the first popular product to offer a discount coupon. Fun fact. But C.W. Post used to be a patient at the Battle Creek at the Sand. Post used to come around at the Sand, right? And then he just left, and all of a sudden had this great idea for cornflakes. What? I'm sorry. No. Not only was he a patient, but when he first came to Battle Creek, he was super sick and had no money. This is how he gets this done. This is how he works his play. So he would work off the debt from his room at Battle Creek. He would do this in the kitchen with W.K. Kellogg, the godfather of milk and cereal. This is how he would sit there and take notes about what this guy's doing. I'm not kidding. I'm not making that. The article that said he would write notes. You would have to. And so, like I said, he basically spent time with the original inventor and wrote his recipes down, and then left and just started his own business, doing the exact same thing. In 1897, Post debuted Grape Nuts, which he called them Grape Nuts because they were using grape sugar and combined that with the crunchiness of the granola. That tastes like with great grape nuts. In 1906, W.K. Kellogg created the Battle Creek Toasted Cornflake Company, which is a lot longer than just the word Post, and that would go on to become Kellogg's. And so basically, I'm not going to bore you guys. They go back and forth for years and years and years and fight about who's not about who created it, but just about trying to establish dominance in that field, which obviously the Kellogg's created. But then there's always going to be competition. If you got something good, there's always going to be competition. It just is. That's how you kind of know if it's good or not. That's pretty much where that's where this ends as far as the idea of how cereal happened, because it goes on and we get Apple Jacks and yada yada yada, and I'll even tell you the story of Tony the Tiger before we get out of here. But there was one little piece of information that I found that I thought was just too. You look this stuff up and you're just like, what? So this story starts in the 1930s with the Ralston Purina Company, and they introduced an early version of Wheat Chex, calling it Shredded Ralston. Now, Wheat Chex is just Chex Mix, for those who are wondering what Wheat Chex is. But they called it Shredded Ralston. Now, the kicker here, the reason why we care is that it was intended to feed the followers of Ralstonism. And Ralstonism is a strict racial social movement that included a belief in controlling the minds. That's where Chex Mix comes from, guys. They originally made Chex Mix to feed people who they were training in the controlling of minds. And I'm not talking MK Ultra. We're not talking CIA. We're talking more like Jerry Jones and some Kool-Aid, but a little bit different. At their height of the Ralstonism, they had about 800,000 followers, and it was their idea that they were creating a new Caucasian world that would castrate all non-white males. And if you don't know what castrate is, I'm not telling you here. Google that for yourself. Sorry if it just got dark, but that's where this information leads you sometimes. I mean, I could not believe what I just saw when I was reading about cereal. That's why I do this podcast. Because you're looking up cereal, and you're like, cool, oh, can I just also find out some information about a racist cult that created cereal too? Sure, why not? And from that, I'm going to tell you the story of Tony the Tiger, and then we're going to round it up. You know how it is. So, after World War II, cereal consumption increased with the advent of the baby boom, and sugar became a selling point. This is where we get all our sugary cereals and all that stuff. Kellogg's invented Frosted Flakes, and its pitchman, Tony the Tiger, began a new era of television advertising for cereal. And so Tony the Tiger was introduced in 1952. Oddly enough, same year that the Queen did her coronation. Been watching all that Queen stuff. It's a whole different story. He initially had a whole gang of other animal friends that helped market his Kellogg's cereal, but after a year, they got rid of all of them. Just he stayed. There was a bunch of things like alligators or like kangaroos and stuff like that. It was, they all had different names. They were all friends, and then Tony just ostracized them all and was like, "No, I got this." He was designed by a group of animators that used to work for Disney. So basically, Disney like low key designed Tony the Tiger. And they also designed other things like the Snap Crackle Pop dudes from Rice Krispie and one of the Baltimore Orioles logos just to even it out. And that is how cereal happened. And now it's time for the roundup. And we're going to round it up. The Roman goddess Ceres is where we get the name cereal. Humanity has been cultivating wheat and other grains for at least 10,000 years. Hot cereals have been around for thousands of years. Cold cereals are not invented until the mid-1800s. This is done by a number of men, but the main drivers behind the idea of the cold cereal are the Kellogg brothers. Things I didn't know before, and now I know them. Never heard of these things. What are they? All right. Let's see. So the first thing I didn't know, which is, some of you may have known this, it is the origin of the word supper. And so it really comes from almost back in the Middle Ages, the medieval times, and it was the second meal of your act, like to end your day. There was a second meal that was usually prepared some 6 to 8 hours later after their breakfast, which we mentioned usually happened around midday anyways. But the original basis for the second meal was often soup or sops, as it became known, and so that's where you get the term. As you continue to go, it just becomes supper. That's your dinner, and that's because it was usually soup based to begin. Just something I didn't know. Let's see the next one. Let's see. This is ridiculous, but I just had to mention it. Tony the Tiger used to have his own Twitter account, but he kept getting sexual advances from the furry community, trying to get him to go out on dates and other things like that. If you don't know what the furry community is, you're in for one heck of a Google search. Let's see here. I talked about the contentious relationship between John Kellogg and his brother W.K. Kellogg, and one thing that I saw that I just felt I had to mention, you talk about this guy John Kellogg was just a piece of work. He would make his little brother take dictation for him while he was on the toilet. So he'd probably be like standing there in the toilet while this guy's taking a dump, having to write down all the amazing thoughts his brother was bringing up. It's like, how many different ways can you torture this guy? Like I said, there's much more. There's a lot more. They had a very interesting relationship. And the last one that I have here, it's just, you keep looking this stuff up and everything's always connected. The daughter of C.W. Post, She took control of the company when he died, and she made a lot more money because people kept on eating that cereal. And she owned a Palm Beach mansion while doing so. Now, she sold it to Donald Trump, and that is what is now Mar-a-Lago. So Mar-a-Lago is really all cereal post-cereal money. It's all Grape Nuts money. Just things we didn't know, you know? All right. That was another episode of HDTH. I want to thank everybody for stopping by and pressing play as you always do. If this was your first time, glad you came by. I don't think there's much else to say. Like I normally do, like and subscribe anywhere you find this, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any of that stuff. It really does help. I see the activity on the pages, and I see the followers, and man, I appreciate you guys. See you guys next week.